afternoon, my beautiful babes and babes. I am your resident active advocate, and today we will be discussing the Disney movie Cinderella in relation to the disabilities present in that movie. And we're not talking about the main character. We are talking about the character of the stepmother, Lady Tremaine. So, Lady Tremaine is Cinderella's stepmother, as I literally just said. And Cinderella's father in this version has passed away, as well as I believe every other version of the story that there is. But when Lady Tremaine takes control of the house, she ensures that her own daughters receive better everything than Cinderella does. She also goes to such measures as to make Cinderella into a slave in her own house, or at least a servant. The disability that I see present here, and I want to put in a little bit of a side note here, don't in real life diagnose from a distance. Not only is that irresponsible, but it's also something which, if you are not a licensed therapist, you don't have the qualifications to do. So regardless of whether you suspect that someone may have a mental illness or any kind of disability, don't try to diagnose from a distance, because not only does that create stigma, but it can also be very inaccurate. So yeah, that's disclaimer number one when it comes to real life cases. However, this is a cartoon, so I feel more than qualified quotation marks, to diagnose Lady Tremaine from a distance. My diagnosis of her is that she has narcissistic personality disorder combined with a healthy measure of Machiavellianism. Neither of these things are intrinsically, quote, bad, obviously, but when you are able to put them together, they can create a bad combination. Narcissistic personality disorder means that because of a perceived lack of love around you, you will turn into your own number one biggest fan. And that can make a person quite self-obsessed. It can make a person want to judge others negatively in order to elevate their own self-image. It can also cause them to mistreat others in the name of elevating themselves, once again. And when you combine this with Machiavellianism, Machiavellianism is defined as going more or less to any lengths to achieve your goals, and this can be outside of the realm of socially agreed upon morality as well. When Lady Tremaine takes control of Cinderella's house and life, she uses Cinderella as a tool to elevate her own standing and that of her daughters. Cinderella, who was already of higher or noble birth, at least of what we would call gentry, which is probably one step down from an actual noble. We don't know whether her father was titled, but one step up from commoner, right? Lady Tremaine, more or less, it dictates that she has in that society a title. She's a lady, so she is not a commoner. She could be gentry, she could be nobility. We don't know. But it is implied that the father, while he was independently wealthy, that he married up in order to assure a good life for his own biological daughter. When Lady Tremaine, however, as I say, takes control of Cinderella's life, she uses her as a tool to enhance her own standing as well as that of her daughters, because she sees her daughters, and this is also a Machiavellian trait. She sees her daughters as sorts of, shall we say, betting chips to increase her own worth in society. Her girls to her are not necessarily, at least this is the way it is portrayed in the movie, are not necessarily valued intrinsically and for their own humanity. They are valued for the way in which they can be used to improve the family situation. This does not include Cinderella. But the very first thing that Lady Tremaine thinks of when they hear about the ball at the castle is, I could get one of my daughters married off to this prince, and they both need to be on their very best behavior and looking their very best in order to do this. So I'm going to work Cinderella off her feet in order to improve their appearance and all of their standing in the public eye. Cinderella, contrastingly, and you will notice, she does not actually have dreams of romance with the prince. She's just looking for a good night out, okay? And she gets a very good night out. But it has to happen through movie magic, because with Cinderella, I would not diagnose her even with something like depression. I would not diagnose Cinderella with any neuroatypicality or disability or anything of that sort, because regardless of all of the terrible things she has suffered, not only the death of her father, but also enslavement in her own house, being underfed, being overworked, making friends with mice rather than with other human beings. So it's heavily implied, at least, that she is sequestered, if not entirely kept out of the public eye. Despite this isolation and despite this maltreatment on the part of her stepmother and stepsisters, Cinderella does not develop any sort of mental health disorder. She does not develop depression. And that, in terms of the movie, is seen as a sign of inner virtue and inner strength. I think that this is also a very ableist narrative because it's not realistic. You can definitely keep your integrity, you can definitely keep your character, but I don't think personally that it's realistic to say that a person can go through years of poor treatment and not suffer any internal consequences therefrom. I know that this is a fairy tale. This is how fairy tales work. Cinderella proves herself to be deserving of the title of princess because she does not give in to despair. She does not turn, shall we say, wicked. She does not forget her kindness. She does not forget her virtue. She does not forget her integrity. And she never complains. That is also a trait that I talked about in Snow White. Thank you, phone. Both of these princesses hold the trait of kindness, the trait of hard work, the trait of integrity in common, and they never lose that throughout. So you could say that Cinderella, in terms of her circumstances, has a positive character arc, and the same with Snow White. But they begin the movie and they end the movie with the same core character. Nothing really changes along those lines in terms of them. It's only their circumstances that improve. Lady Tremaine, contrastingly, because of her narcissism and because of her Machiavellianism, is put out of reach of the goals she wants to attain, not only for her daughters, but mostly for herself. Because, as I say, she's using her daughters, at least in my interpretation, as betting chips to improve her own fortunes. And that is frowned upon, even though in a capitalist society, which this already would have been, even though they were under a monarchic system, as you can see, it's still capitalist in terms of social climbing and in terms of what you can gain through something called hypergamy, which means marrying over your head in terms of status and wealth. This isn't a thing that only females do. This isn't a thing that only males do. This is a thing that happens and has happened throughout societies, throughout the ages. But it is currently frowned upon as a bad thing, even though back in the day, most marriages in the real world would have been arranged in terms of hypergamy, and especially if it was the family of the female seeking to marry up. And that is exactly what Lady Tremaine had in mind for one of her daughters. The reason why I think she uses them as betting chips is because she doesn't seem to care which one of them gets the prince, as long as it's one of them. So she's not looking for them to have true love. She's only looking for them to have status, which would improve her own status. And I think that that is where her narcissism comes into play as well, because it's not about them, it's all about me. And that can be a very negative thing. But self-love is actually the opposite of narcissism. Don't get the two confused. Narcissism is a mask for self-loathing or for feeling not good enough. Even though on her own, Lady Tremaine has quite enough wealth, obviously, she's called Lady, so she's high enough in society to be able to make a go of it, which she definitely does. But it's not enough for her. So narcissism, which is actually self-loathing masked as self-love, combined with Machiavellianism, creates the mental ethos of Lady Tremaine. And that is why I find this movie very interesting, because it's not the main character who has any form of neuroatypicality, and it's not even one of the sidekicks. It is the villain in this case. But this villain doesn't have magical superpowers. She only has power over one aspect of her life, which is her daughters, and that includes her stepdaughter. So, I hope that this is found to be an interesting interpretation. And tomorrow we will be talking about another movie, but I'm not sure which one yet. So we will find out together. And I will see y'all tomorrow. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Leave me snide little cute things to read down below. Please and thank you. And have a lovely, very windy day. Mwah.